else. Right now, let's go straight to the phones, continue the Tom Brady talk, and bring in Mike Florio of ProFootballTalk.com, who broke some news in the last 24 hours. Mike wrote that Tom Brady's 4-game suspension could have been knocked down to, well, 2 games, maybe even 1 game if Brady had done a little better job cooperating and showing some contrition. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you guys?
Doing great. So, Mike, why didn't Tom Brady take that offer? Why didn't he allow the suspension to be knocked down to 2 or even 1 game?
Well, first of all, he contends there was never a counteroffer from the NFL. I suspect that in discussions between the lawyers, this was something that the NFL's lawyers made clear to the NFLPA would be the ground rules for any settlement. We need to have an acknowledgement of awareness of what Beavis and Butthead, the 2 equipment guys, were doing with the footballs. We need to have some sort of an acknowledgement of failure to cooperate. We need to have an apology, and if that happens, it'll be at least cut in half. And the thinking was that if it's a really good apology, a really strong statement, maybe they'd cut it down 3 games. That was a non-starter. It never was reduced to writing. It's available, presumably now, if Tom Brady wants it, and that's one thing we can't forget. This thing moves to court now. It still could be settled. And, in fact, the chances of the settlement go up because you get a judge involved who says, hey, NFL, NFLPA, I want you to settle this case. You're going to go into a room, and you're not coming out until you come out with an agreement. Some judges will do that.
Mike, this is Woody. I would say Bob Kravitz started this story. You have carried it better than anyone else since the very beginning, so I respect what you've achieved here. Just to follow up, you have a law degree. Federal judges don't want arbitration cases to come into their courts. That's why I would believe, and tell me if I'm totally off base here, that a federal judge is going to say, hey, you guys have agreed to arbitration as part of your collective bargaining agreement. What is it doing in my court? Am I totally off here?
No, you're not totally off, but here's the reality. The federal government and judges generally love it when private parties have their own arbitration arrangements, because judges aren't paid by the hour. They're not paid by the case. You're just there. You're on salary, and you got to take whatever comes in. And when there are parties who have their own agreements, their own arrangements to resolve these cases, judges love that because that's less cases they have to get in the middle of. So it's a high standard. It's a high bar. You have to show that there was some sort of wrongdoing in the process, some sort of inherent unfairness, arbitrary and capricious outcome, partiality on the part of the arbitrator. So it's not, let's just go back to square one and relitigate this. It's going to be a very narrow analysis of the situation. Can the NFLPA show that there were enough flaws in the process that justify this suspension being overturned? That's the key, and it's not an easy thing to do. Now, it doesn't mean the NFL's PA is going to lose, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be a situation where we go back to square one and do this all over again.
Mike, why do you believe Tom Brady really wants to fight this? Is it about legacy? Is it about he believes his legal team can win it? Is it about his just desire to be on the field? What is Brady doing here?
I think it's all of the above, and, you know, even if he's guilty, I think he believes they haven't proven it, and there's no way they can prove it because no one has confessed. It's all circumstantial evidence. There's no hard evidence. There's no smoking gun. And I'm going to resist admitting to anything because I didn't do anything. And I guess there's a chance he really didn't do anything. I'm troubled by some of the evidence that we've seen. I'm just concerned that Ted Wells, the investigator, who had the opportunity to take those text messages that are very troubling between John Yastrzemski and Jim McNally and parlay those into a confession. You know, you're paying a lawyer $1,000 an hour. I'd like to think he'd be able to get a low-level equipment guy in a room for 15 minutes, confront him with those text messages, confront him with other allegations that are being made, and get him to admit to it. And that's the biggest failing in all of this. Ted Wells had the keys to this thing. He just didn't know how to put the keys in the door. And if he had, we wouldn't be talking about PSI measurements in the ideal gas law and whether or not Tom Brady destroyed his cell phone. We'd be talking about the fact that Jim McNally or John Yastrzemski or both of them admitted to doing exactly what they're accused of doing.
Mike, I said this guy have trickle-down effect to Buffalo. They think they're going to be in the race in the division. Denver wanting to be #1 seed. 2 things about it. What do you think is going to be the ultimate fallout from this? And 2, part of that ultimate fallout has, because of his decision, Roger Goodell strengthened his role as the commissioner, or has he created enough of an abyss with enough owners that he's going to be the fallout where he loses his job?
I don't think he loses his job over this, and I think the way that Roger Goodell has handled this is a direct result of the firestorm that emerged last year based on the way he handled the Ray Rice case. I think he resolved after that case to never be accused again of ever going too easy on anyone. Because when he goes too aggressively after a player and his rulings get overturned later, does anybody ever say the commissioner's incompetent? The commissioner needs to be... We just shrug. Oh, 10 games down to 4 games for Greg Hardy. Okay. All right, no big deal. Ray Rice's indefinite suspension thrown out by a judge, no big deal. The bounty suspension's all completely thrown out by Paul Tagliabue. There's no reflection on Roger Goodell. So that tells him, I'm always going to go farther. I'm never going to go soft on a guy like Tom Brady or anybody else. And I don't think there's anything in this case that jeopardizes his job. I do think, though, going forward, at some point, you're going to have some owners ask, is it really a good idea to have Roger Goodell as the final say in these cases? Are we at the point where it's becoming an embarrassment for the league to have all that power in one office and all the issues and all the fights that come out of it? Should we find a way to use an outside arbitrator in these cases? And, if you feel that strongly about your position in a given case, why would you be concerned about a third party scrutinizing your work? So I think in the next labor deal, there may be a greater chance that power is taken away from whoever the commissioner is come 2021.
It's really funny, Mike, and I know you're a historian too, that this all goes back to the scandal with the Black Sox, that baseball decided we're going to appoint a czar. We're going to find a judge
Landis,
and we're just going to give him absolute power over everybody. And it seems like that it's never been well defined almost since then, whether you want to streak a weak commissioner and a strong ownership, or a strong commissioner who's over the ownership and the players and everything else. It just seems like it still can't be defined of exactly the role of the commissioner.
And I think we have to be realistic about the pressures that a commissioner faces. I mean, during the lockout, the NFL was pushing the idea that the NFL is the commissioner for the entire sport and all constituents of the sport. The reality is he's got 32 constituents, and they own the team. And they decide if he stays in the job and how much money he makes, and it puts him in some tough spots. And that was one of the big storylines before the ruling came out. How much are other owners communicating with Roger Goodell, lobbying Roger Goodell, pressuring Roger Goodell? It put him in a very, very tough spot. And if you have a third party who handles these cases, that gives the commissioner a certain degree of cover when it comes to trying to tiptoe out of this minefield. And even though he ran out of the minefield yesterday with the strength of that ruling, it doesn't mean he's going to win. It doesn't mean this is over, and it doesn't mean there aren't more embarrassments to come for the NFL.
Hey, Mike, really appreciate your time. We know you've had an extremely busy last 24 hours. Want to tell everybody you can listen to Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk Live. It's on NBC Sports Radio. It rolls from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern, which Mountain Time would be 10 to 1 o'clock on a daily basis. And, Mike, your Twitter handle, which is where I follow you, why don't you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, at Pro Football Talk. Every story we post, we run a link to it with a headline, and so you can just scroll down that, and if you see something you're interested in, you click on it and you can read the whole story.
Beautiful. Mike, thanks again.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, Mike Florio of ProFootballTalk.com. And that was brought to you by Shanahan's Steakhouse. Woody and I eat there all the time. You know why we eat there all the time? Because it is the best restaurant in town. Been voted in a lot of surveys as the best restaurant in town. There's not better food anywhere. Yeah, anywhere, anytime.
And we don't talk about things we don't believe in. Tonight is my daughter and I's celebration for her birthday.
You going there?
To Shanahan.
Beautiful.
We're going to see Ant-Man.
Have a nice
We're
time.
going to Shanahan.
And tell Shanahan happy birthday for him. Or tell Shannon. And if you see Shanahan, tell him happy birthday for him. So book a
tell Ant-Man. Tell Ant-Man happy birthday.
Book a reservation today at Shanahan's.
It's confusing. Ant-Man, Shanahan, Shannon.
Yeah. So you can book that reservation at shanahansteakhouse.com.